Hello and welcome to the Mr. All-In podcast. As usual, my name is Jacob Staten, and as super usual, I'm joined by JJ Armstrong. JJ, how are you?
Very, very good. I would like to apologise for our absence over the last few weeks. I have been in Sicily, sunning it up by the pool, which was lovely. So
Eating
I apologise. Eating gabagool.
Sitting by the pool.
Nice. So I apologise that we haven't been there for the last few weeks, but we're back now. You're welcome. Jacob, how are you?
Yes, yeah, I'm very well, mate. Thank you, very well. Sitting in sunny Nottingham. Not eating gabagool by the pool.
No.
But, just waiting for you to come back and say, we're recording today.
Well, I am back after living the good life, but we could be living an even better life if you listening out there could help us out, because on our YouTube at the minute, I don't know if a few weeks ago, you might remember we asked if you could subscribe to get it to 900 subscribers on YouTube. Well, now we're on 987 and we're 13 away from 1,000. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, or if you're watching this for the first time on YouTube and you're not subscribed, please do us a massive favour and hit that subscribe button. Get us to 1,000. It would be hugely appreciated. We never thought we'd get to 900, never mind 1,000. So yeah, it would be great if you could. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you very much. So on to Forest versus Brentford, JJ. Oh, wait. We haven't talked about Burnley, have we? Cover that.
We haven't talked about Burnley, but no one cares about that anymore. It's fine.
Well, I think I've summarised super quick then. I think the Burnley game, I think we started really well. I think it almost looked like the opposite of what normally happens, where we start a bit slow and we come into the game last half an hour. I think we started the first half an hour really well and we kind of slunk out of the game. I thought we did really well to get the goal back. It's definitely a handball by Berger in the build up to their second that got disallowed, so I'm really glad to see that. Just a bit disappointed we couldn't really push on and get the win.
Yes. Couldn't really care. We're not going to go over it because it was a long time ago, but Burnley, happy to get a point. City, happy to only lose by 2 and give a good performance. On to Brentford. Yep.
Next, Brentford. Okay, so we started with a starting 11. We lined up with a 4-3-3, which is, I think, what most people really want us to see. Obviously, we had a few issues with, there was no Ola Aina, was there, or Nuno Tavares. I don't know. Aina keeps getting injured in training, maybe because you play like 1 or 2 games and disappear for one, then come back. It's, Nick Carter at left back. I don't think anybody thought that was particularly, not necessarily going to end well, but thought it was maybe a good idea. If I'm Harry Toffolo sat on the bench, I am fuming. No Ryan Yates. I'm not sure if they've disclosed what's wrong with him, but he's a huge miss. It probably possibly explains why he's not started. I don't think he started a single game this season, has he? But because I thought he'd be a shoo-in for some of the games, given his performances from the bench, and a debut for Murillo.
Yes, I think Yates started against Chelsea, I believe. Could be the only one, but
no, he came on.
He started, but don't worry about it. So yeah, the lineup was announced. I was fairly surprised to see Murillo sort of thrown in for a debut. Definitely wasn't expecting that, but I guess it's a good game to chuck him in at. No Morgan Gibbs White. Slightly surprised at that, but also not really. It makes sense. If we want to get 3 in midfield and 3 up top, it sort of makes sense that he's the one to make way. And
I think he needed a bit of a boot up the arse as well, didn't he? Not like he'd been bad, but like just start from the bench, have a bit of a break. He's had a long summer, hasn't he?
Yeah. And my second part to that was, he needed a swift kick up the arse. So made sense. And as we saw when he eventually came on, which we'll talk about later, he was better for it. So it was an interesting lineup. I thought we had enough from that to sort of win the midfield. Interested to see how our defence would shape up with the surprise inclusion of Murillo and Niakate at left back, but I wasn't concerned when I saw that lineup.
No. I've just checked. I do apologise. Yates did start against Chelsea. First off, I think we did start brightly, but I think by and large it was a bit dull, wasn't it? when you did have the ball in the back of the net, it was just offside, and then Brentford started coming into it. It sort of feels like that's how our games against the lower level opposition go, doesn't it, JJ? We we're not really sure how to throw punches at them. It feels to me like we do. Do we set up defensively like we do against, because we're really successful against the bigger teams. Even if you look at the games we lost, Arsenal, City, United, I think we played really well in all three of those games and only lost by the odd goal. But you can't really do that against teams that are around your kind of levels, because they're probably looking to do the same thing. You nullify each other, the odd goal, or nick it, and it doesn't always go to us, does it? So I think it's nice to see Cooper mixing it up against these teams, but it's failing. It's not clicking yet, is it? Really?
No, and I think we looked bright. We for the first time in a while, we looked quite comfortable in possession. Brentford were happy to let us have the ball. We just couldn't capitalise enough to sort of, like you say, land a punch. I'd say we tried to throw a few, if we were using that analogy, like there was the odd time where it looked like we threatened to do something, but just that slight lack of ability to sort of get the ball in the back of the net still persists. But it's nice to sort of sit here and say that we're playing comfortable against this level of team and comparing ourselves to a team like Brentford, because as it stands, I know people aren't always a fan of Brentford within the Forest community, but I would define them as a sort of mid-table, sort of, hovering around mid-table club. I wouldn't define them as a relegation threatened club. So We're talking about being in the company of Brentford, and later we're going to talk about being in the company of teams like Crystal Palace. So it's nice to talk about us setting up against similar-minded teams and similar performing teams like Brentford, because I think that does show an element of progress from where we were last season. I think Brentford, I don't like him, but Brentford have a very good manager, and I think he is very similar to Steve Cooper in the way he sets up. They're fluid. They don't just stick to one formation, depending on how the game is going or how the opposition, lines up. They're fluid in their style and formation. So, yeah, Brentford were comfortable allowing us to have the ball. We did look bright. We looked good in the first half, and they definitely came into it and settled into it towards the second half. And my mate messaged me, who's a Sheffield Wednesday supporter, and he just messaged me saying, "I've had to turn your game off because this is unwatchable." And I can see why, if you didn't support Forest or Brentford, it would probably be a little bit of a boring game to watch, because you can't really point to too much happening in that first half. We'll get to it, but a lot started to happen in the second half. But yeah, first half was largely comfortable for me, and I just thought, I can only really see this going one way at the moment, and that will be Forest edging the 3 points. But as typical Forest goes, we don't often do two halves well. No, we do not. No, I think your point around having a nice base. We're not losing. We've been pretty comfortable. It's a really nice base to build on in the second half. Whereas what actually happened was Moussa Niakhaté came out, and it was a clumsy challenge for the second yellow. I don't think anybody would have really minded if it wasn't a yellow card, but I don't think anyone would also argue that it was a yellow card. It was certainly no intent, but it was just extremely clumsy, wasn't it? Because he had 2 or 3 digs at it first, where he's tried to get the ball and maybe got. I don't even think he got frustrated. I think he's just tried to go for the ball again. The player's come across him and he's got him down the back of the leg, hasn't he? So I would say I'd say that clumsy summarises the whole team coming out of the second half. I think we were clumsy in general. Before that, there was obviously the contentious potential penalty of Turner just taking way too long to clear the ball. Wissa sliding, and the ball ends up trickling towards the goal line. Bolly clears it. Penalty. Like, it is a penalty.
I can only think, and I don't think this is exactly what happened, but in my head, I can only think that it wasn't a penalty because they played the advantage in case the ball went into the back of the net. And obviously an advantage doesn't have to end with a positive outcome. You know, if the ball had gone in the back of the net, they wouldn't have wanted the penalty, would they? I can only imagine that is the reasoning it wasn't looked at or given as a penalty. But in my opinion, it was a stonewall penalty. I just, and even a red card because he's not tried to play the ball as he's just legged him up. So I don't really get it. And obviously, I think with what happened in the Spurs match on the Saturday, I think it kind of is flown under the radar, hasn't it?
Yeah, it was a penalty for me. And whether the advantage was the reason it wasn't given, the problem with all these things are it doesn't get explained and nobody knows why. And was it looked at? Was it checked? I can't quite remember if I heard them say it was being checked, or if it was checked, was it not given, and why was it not given? And the communication to the people watching is better than the communication to the fans in the ground.
Yeah.
And I think there'd be a lot of fans in the ground that wouldn't even know that it was being checked or that there was a potential for a penalty there. So on reflection, watching it back, I do think Brentford can feel aggrieved at that decision. However, it balances itself out because last season, we remember what happened with that very same player when they were gifted a penalty when Dean Henderson supposedly tackled him and VAR or whoever apologised and said it wasn't because there wasn't enough contact. So they can definitely feel aggrieved. We could definitely feel aggrieved last year. It's evened itself out. We were very lucky to get away with it. But I think in general, extremely clumsy from Turner. And after we talk about sort of the game, it's definitely worth us talking about his performance in general. But yeah, just very clumsy second half. And back to the Niakate yellow was a yellow. Both were yellows for me. He definitely, I think it was intentional, but it wasn't malicious. I think it was, again, clumsy and looked worse than his intention. Wasn't malicious at all. Yeah. It was a genuine attempt. It was just unfortunate, a bit naive, and left us in a tricky situation.
Yeah, and I think that tricky situation is summed up because obviously the ball in from the free kick is literally headed into the back of the net by somebody who's unmarked. And I can only presume that they were unmarked because of this organisation following the red card. I think it was Murillo's man, but I wouldn't have been surprised to see or hear that, prior to being sent off, it was Niakate's man, if that makes sense. I don't think Turner shrouds himself in glory with trying to keep the header out. It was a free header and it was a decent header, but I don't know. I still think he could have got a strong hand to it and just pushed it away.
Well, he also thinks
especially
that.
His reaction afterwards as well.
Yeah, he also thinks that, and I'll give him kudos to admitting a mistake in coming out and saying, I think he said, I should have just caught it. I believe he said that anyway. But either way, he didn't crown himself in any glory, but none of our defence did. And we can say that's Niakate's man, but, to some degree.
Yeah, he's still been picked up, but it's just a disorganisation, isn't it?
Yeah, sloppy, very sloppy. And you knew it was going to happen from the red card and the resulting free kick. And from that, it feels like a very long way to go. 10 men, 1-0 down against a good team that we're finally balanced with as it is. I personally thought this is it, really. I don't know if we can. I think it would. I always thought it might end 1-0. I don't know if they'll particularly score any more, but I can't see how we're going to, put the ball in the back of the net and pull it back, so to speak.
And then what actually happens is we do pretty good. We bring on, who do we bring on? Toffolo, Morgan Gibbs White. Morgan Gibbs White's ball out to Harry Toffolo was probably even better than the ball in, which is saying something from Toffolo. And then Nico Dominguez's header, good lord, what I've seen a few people say it's a goalkeeping error, but not for me. I think it was just a great looping header. Just a wonderful goal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the ball, a lovely ball out to Toffolo, but it wasn't better than the cross. The cross was perfect. And Toffolo in general really impressed me when he came on. He looked hungry. He looked up for it. He must have had a tenner on Forest 1-1 because he looked good. And I don't think I've really seen that from Toffolo. Like, we've seen some good performances, but he looked fired up, which, showcases the next man up mentality that this Forest squad has. So it's great to see. And if at the start of the game, obviously we saw Niakate at left back, if that said Toffolo, I generally don't think I'd have been too happy about that and thought, surely we're at a stage now where Toffolo shouldn't be starting at left back. But he did enough yesterday to convince me. He did enough against Brentford to convince me that, I wouldn't be too aggrieved if he did start, because he looked really good.
I think. Sorry, just to say there as well. Like, I think the thing for me was as well. Not only did we lose out by having a centre back at left back with Niakate, but we also lose out by not having our best centre back at centre back. If that makes sense. So, I'd rather have played Toffolo and accept that he's maybe not at the level we want to be at, but we're still up on the levels because we've got our best centre back playing his best position, if that makes sense. It's one of those things where it's fine after the fact to look at it, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but just looking at it back, I'm like, we shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, we'll talk centre backs as well after the game, because I thought Bolly and Murillo did brilliantly. But back to the header, beautiful header. It was a great cross, really good cross. But the header was something else.
Yes.
Unsure how he managed to loop it with such pace and power over a keeper from where he did, but it was a brilliant header. And Dominguez excites me a lot as a Forest fan.
Yes.
He looked great against City. Tough place to sort of be dropped in, but he looked brilliant, and you could see an element of tenacity and what he can bring to the midfield. But I think he cemented that against Brentford by showing what he brings to the midfield. And I think he has made himself essential already, that midfield. So he sort of floated under the radar a little bit in terms of the transfer window, because we got someone like SANGARE in and we got Hudson-Odoi in, but he's a very exciting addition. And, the fact that we swap plus cash for Remo Freuler is a fantastic bit of business. And I think he's got...
I didn't think it was plus cash. I just thought it was a straight swap.
No, I think it was like 8 or 9 million on top of that. Something like that. I can certainly be corrected. But I think Freuler always threatened to sort of dictate the game, but never quite did. And we saw elements of his play where I think he's a great player. And just look at what he does and what he brings to the team. And I still think that, however, if I had to match the two up, I know they're different players, I would probably choose... I'd definitely choose Dominguez. I think he looks like a great player. So, brilliant header to get us back into it. Great to see his passion in scoring and Gibbs White's passion in scoring, in him scoring as well. It was great to see.
Yeah. I think a great follow through there for around Gibbs' White passion of the hunger. Was it a corner that we had, or a free kick? And basically we've put it in, and then it basically Brentford have counter-attacked really, really well. But then, like grease lightning, Morgan Gibbs White's raced back and slid in on Wemo and going mad in front of the Brian Clough stand. It was just, it was exactly the kind of thing that dropping him was meant to do, and it did it, if that makes sense. He's not playing the full match. He's come on and he's hungry. He's got a point to prove. He's taking it on the chin, seemingly, and he's ready to now go, right, Gaffer, don't do that again, because I'm shit up. Which is, it's just wonderful to see.
Yeah, I think Steve Cooper is, and this is why he's a great manager, was very clever in his description of why Gibbs White wasn't playing, because he didn't use language like dropping. He used language like resting, for example. So obviously very good in his man management, but it proved the point that we needed it to prove. And I think Gibbs White will only be better for it, knowing that he isn't completely undroppable, because for the last few weeks, we've all been saying that Gibbs White doesn't quite have that sort of influence that he did last season at the minute. And there's something where it's not quite working, or he's overthinking it, and he has had a busy summer and he's not really had a rest and all that stuff. And the response has always been, yes, but this team is built around him and he is undroppable. But that isn't true, because he was dropped or rested, whatever language you want to use. So it proves to him that, he isn't undroppable. And his influence when he came on, I think, has been more than any other game. You can shout about his 2 assists against Man United, but, one of them was Taiwo, who did all the work, and the other one hit Bolly's face. So I don't think, obviously great that he has those stats, but stats don't paint the whole picture. No. And I think we'll see a hungry, determined Gibbs White. And I think we always have this season. I'm not saying he's not either of those things or hasn't been either of those things. He has. It just hasn't quite come off, and sometimes that is football. But from here onwards, I think he will kick on. I don't know if he'll start the next game. I think the 4-3-3, there's a little bit of tweaking needed to be done to get him back in. But we know his quality. We know his influence. We know his creativity.
I think he will start the next game.
We'll discuss it. We will discuss it. But yeah, I mean, the passion to tackle and celebrate like that as if he scored a goal. That's what Forest fans want to see, and that's what Forest fans love. Like, they love a player that gives their all, and he is one of those players. So yeah, love to see that. Really love to see that.
Absolutely, and I think another. I think that's probably it for like talking points of the game. I think the only other talking point from the game is the fact that there was 13 minutes added on.
Yeah, I wasn't too happy about that.
I would have swallowed anywhere between kind of 6 and 8 because there was a red card and 2 goals and some substitutions and stuff like that. But 13 minutes, I think I touched on it earlier around. There's the whole Tottenham Liverpool game. We've had decisions as well. I think the whole refereeing situation at the minute, they're in a bit of disrepair at the minute. I think that they've not got a lot of chit in the bank with fans and things like that. Just like 13, just where did it come from? It doesn't make sense. I'm more than happy to be wrong. If anyone in the comments can let us know, tot it up maybe from the game. But yeah, it just doesn't make sense.
It's one of those things. It's another addition to the modern game that it's difficult to get to grips with, because you're looking at the clock and you're looking at it being 88 minutes, 89 minutes. You're thinking, right, come on, we're nearly there. Come on, we could get a point from this. It would be a very good point. Let's get it. Then 13 minutes are put up on the board and you think, fucking hellfire. And the thing that I will go back to is, as Forest fans, added time or injury time is never nice anyway. But, a few weeks ago, Sheffield United were beating Spurs away 1-0. And Spurs scored in the 98th minute, in the 100th minute, and Sheffield United had a player sent off in the 114th minute, or 104th minute, whatever it is. Not 114th. So, a lot can happen in 14 minutes added time. A hell of a lot, because it's 14 minutes. So us having 13 minutes worried me. I think, we did well to grind it out, and the whole second half, following the red card and goal down, we did well to grind out the result. But it's an extra element of worry that I do not need as a Forest fan. So wild. Yeah. It's tough to get to grips with.
I think for me as a football fan, I think I have absolutely no issue with it being 13 minutes. I just don't know where it came from. I think what they're actually, personally for me, what they're actually doing with all this added time on is good. I think it's a good thing. I liked it at the World Cup. I just think for me personally, there's probably two ways of doing it to bring the fans, to get the fans more engaged in it. And that is one, either move to a stop clock like they have in rugby, where literally as soon as it ticks over to in rugby, as soon as it ticks over to 80 minutes, the clock goes red, and the next time the ball goes dead, the game stops. Or put the referee's time stopwatch on the board, so that when he stops it, it counts up on the board, so everybody knows how much added time is, and it's not a surprise, if that makes sense. But yeah, I just think that they need to, and this goes for all of officiating in football at the minute. I think they just need to bring the fans into it more. You said it about the VAR check for the Wissa goal and for the Wissa penalty and stuff like that. It wasn't checked, but let's hear what the referees are saying. Kind of partially mic them up. Let's like at the Women's World Cup where they explain the VAR decision. It's much harder to explain, to argue and disagree with someone when they've calmly and rationally explained what they saw and why they're giving a decision. You can't just blindly go there and sit there and swear and shout and go, it makes no sense, blah, blah, blah. Whereas if they say, I'm giving this because this is what I saw. You might still disagree, but it's harder to argue with it, if that makes sense.
I think transparency and clarity for the paying fans and watching fans that are they're interested in the sport and watching the game is essential for the enjoyment of the sport, and also, you know, I'd say like lack of frustration after the fact. But, you know, if a watching fan or fan in the stadium were privy to the scenes of the Liverpool offside, if you could hear those discussions live in the stadium and watching, you know, you'd seen the fallout following that release of the audio. But I think obviously if it was live, it would have been even worse. So there's a lot of work to do in general to make these new additions beneficial and clear for the paying and watching fan. They're just not quite there at the minute.
No, absolutely. So I think a few special mentions to run through. I think Bolly and Murillo were fantastic, particularly Murillo on his debut. Dominguez, again, another sensational performance. It's a shame that he's injured. Hopefully it's not for a long time, because I think he could be a really key part of this season. We've already touched it. Toffolo came on and was brilliant. Next man up mentality. Glad to see that the whole betting stuff hasn't kind of got to him, or certainly doesn't look like it has. And Sangare as well, who's really starting to. He's kind of reminding me a little bit of Morgan Gibbs White last season, where he took a bit of time to grow into what we're trying to do. But you know, I think we're really starting to see him come to fruition as well.
Yeah, some of the little things that Sangare did were lovely. And Murillo, particularly for me, I thought he had a great debut, and he's very, very young, and he's played very few professional games, but I'm not too sure you could tell. Obviously, he had a bit of a shaky start, which is normal, but, you know, there's flashes there, and there's he saved a goal on the line, but in particular, the run that he did out from defence, that alone has given me a lot of promise.
Yes.
So he's brilliant, and Bolly has been one of our most consistent performers this season.
Yeah,
he's had. I think he's had
him in the team consistently.
Yeah, one or two games where he's been poor, but the rest of the team were. But largely, you know, he's been great, and his last minute Bolly blocks, I just love to see them. He's sort of got that as a bit of a trademark now. So it's an exciting time. Some very positive performances. But a performance that we semi-discussed earlier that we need to touch upon that was a negative one for me was Turner's. So, Jacob, hit me. Does he need to be dropped?
I think he's had some good matches for us. I've been disappointed by him in the last couple of matches. I think for me, he probably gets one more game. And I'm reminded of the situation when we were coming up out the championship with because everyone, I think, a lot of people forget that Brice Samba actually got dropped that season. You know, forget how good he was in the playoffs and the final and all that stuff. But he actually got dropped for being, you know, for punching a Stoke player in the back of the head and getting sent off. And Horvath came in, and I don't really think Ethan Horvath did anything wrong to get to lose his place. I think he just came back from international duty late, didn't he? For no fault of his own. So I think it's probably a bit of a similar situation to that, in that I think Vlachodimos is the first, was signed as to be the first choice goalkeeper. I think it's fair that Turner wasn't dropped immediately. I think he's probably, if he hasn't done enough already to get dropped, I think he's got one more gaff in him, and then he will be dropped in favour of Vlachodimos. But I don't really mind if he gets one more chance, and I don't really mind if he's not starting the next game. Yeah,
I think that's a fair assessment. I personally think he will be dropped. I think if Vlachodimos has been brought in as the number one, you're essentially waiting for the reason to drop Turner, because
he's done it.
He has done it for me, and he has shown and showcased himself that he is a good keeper, and I have felt relatively confident with him in most of the games. But the last few, and particularly the last one against Brentford, he hasn't filled me with confidence and looked shaky. And I think when you're bringing a player in to be the first choice in whatever position, but you've got a player in that spot that essentially it's their spot to lose. As soon as they give you a window to say, right, well, now you're out, that's always going to happen. And I think he did more than enough to sort of give Cooper a reason to instill Vlachodimos as a first choice keeper. And then we go to this next thing where if Turner is dropped, it's the new keeper's sort of spot to lose. And if he has a gaff, Turner's back in. And if he is, I'm still confident because I know he's a good keeper because I've seen it. So we're in a good spot where we haven't seen this guy. I've heard very good things, but Vlachodimos is supposedly a good keeper. So if he shows that, brilliant. And if not, I'm happy with Turner anyway. Largely. Obviously not always convinced, but if this guy's better, then great. But, it's better than having, I think, Horvath or Hennessy as a backup because then you would feel less confident. But as it stands, it doesn't really matter. So,
no.
Yeah, I think it's time for him to be dropped. He seems like a good character. He seems to be reflective and honest and open in admitting his mistakes. And if anything, the next time he gets a chance, if it is next week and he isn't dropped, or if it's when he gets a chance to get back in the team, I think he will show hunger and determination to keep that spot and make that spot his own, which is, a great characteristic of him. So, yeah, obviously no point second guessing whether he will or not, but I think it's time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that takes us into previewing Crystal Palace away, which is the evening kickoff on Saturday.
By 5:30. Yeah.
5:30, late afternoon kickoff.
Yeah. Just before that, let's just say Forest v Brentford was billed as a Super Sunday, with it being the only game of the day, and also it was Forest v Brentford. I'm a Forest fan, and even I don't think it was that super.
Ain't nothing super about that, is
There's nothing super about it, but lovely to have Forest on Sky in the evening.
Showcased.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so we're being showcased again, aren't we? This time away at Selhurst Park. You've written an interesting stat here, JJ. So Palace haven't won, that's drawn 3 and lost 3, or kept a clean sheet in any of the last 6 home league games against Nottingham Forest. I think apart from last season's one, some of those go back a long, long time, don't they?
Yeah, but, it's one of those cases of that stat is favourable, but when you look back into it, it's probably a decent time ago since it made any sense.
I think this is going to be a very, very interesting game, and I think this is the kind of game the result is going to show us as to whether we're going to be, are we fighting for kind of upper mid-table, so I'm thinking 10th, or are we better than the rest, if that makes sense. So are we if we can go to Palace and get a good result, I'm talking like maybe a win or like a really positive draw, we could be fighting for that kind of mid-table spot. If we go there and it's not, we scrape a draw, we lose, I'm thinking, we're at least not one of the 4, maybe 5 worst Premier League teams of all time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a very interesting fixture, this one, and the sort of the lexicon towards Forest at the minute is starting to shift in the media. The influence of them saying mid-table clubs for Forest v Brentford.
Thank you, Paddy Power.
And I think TalkSport billed it as a mid-table clash, or someone said this is boring because it's just 2 mid-table teams. So, the language towards Forest is starting to change slightly. Which could be too early, could be premature, but it's nice to be in those conversations. And I don't think there's a team that identifies themselves as any more mid-table than Crystal Palace. I think they are great at cementing themselves as a mid-table club, capable of beating bigger teams, capable of getting a good result against bigger teams, and capable of, smashing weak teams. So they're an interesting side, and I think at the moment, at where we are at with Forest at the minute, they're a team that we can aspire to be like. So this fixture, like you say, does, I think, give us an idea where we are at, whether the whole language of being a mid-table club is premature, whether we're pushing for more, or whether we're being too ambitious and we are, we are still, like you say, the best of the rest, and nice try, but you're lucky that there's a few teams worse than you. So Palace have just beaten Man United away. Play them twice in a week. Cup game you can't even look at for any influence on this fixture because they made a hell of a lot of changes. But their performance against Man United, I think Man United are in trouble at the minute, so I don't know if it is the best thing to say they've beaten Man United, therefore they will beat us, because I think Man United are in a very bad place at the minute. But they've had an okay start to the season. They've lost against teams you'd expect to lose to, like Arsenal, Villa, and they're sort of drawn or beaten teams you'd expect them to beat, like Sheffield United, Brentford, Wolves, Fulham, blah, blah, blah. So it all makes sense at the minute. So I think it's going to be an interesting game. But like you say, it's going to show where we're at.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be a real marker for the season, I think, early doors. What are you saying for the result then, JJ?
I think it will be a tough battle, and I think we'll get points from this game. So I'm going to go with 1-1. Okay.
I'm going to go 2-1 to Nottingham Forest.
An away win. Yes. An infamous away win.
I'm confident we can set the marker. That's where I'm going. Glass half full.
That's good. And I think we have shown enough in the last few weeks, and our squad shows enough to be ambitious and confident in predicting 3 points against Crystal Palace away. And they do have a good squad, but you look at a few of the names and we could do them on paper. So it's just going to be a really interesting game, and I think we'll learn a lot from it, and we'll be able to unpack a lot more about this squad after it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're listening for the first time, thank you for finding us. We really appreciate it. And if you are listening again, it means the world to us. Thank you very much. You Reds.
Please subscribe and get us to 1,000. Thank you very much. You Reds.